We have an error with Facebook.
Since it's live on my end.
On Facebook?
No, I'm on StreamYard.
Yeah, I think it's on give me 1 second. I am going to figure this out. Interesting. Well, it gave time for Tim to be there. Beckett, is there any chance that you are troubleshooting this Facebook thing, or do you want me to do it?
I'll see if I can get it working. I don't know. It was giving me errors before, and I couldn't figure out why.
Before I had to like delete it, but it won't let me delete it. So I don't know what's going on there. But we are live on YouTube. So let's go through our housekeeping, and hopefully by the time we're done, we'll figure this out. And if not, then we'll join the Facebook group later. All right. So welcome to our monthly listening club. For those of you out there that don't know, we have 2 monthly clubs and 1 quarterly club, and I got excited and jumped to the slide that had them on there. So that's already up. On top of our listening club, where we listen to an album every month, we also have a movie club, which we actually had our discussion this past Monday, and that is up both in YouTube as well as on the Facebook. We watched Swiss Army Man, and we were able to have a discussion about it. Not sure if Beckett's sure if she likes it or not, but we did our best to convince her. So you can go ahead and listen to that. And we also have a quarterly book club. We're reading The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstein. We'll be having that discussion at the end of next month. And this is a really fun book. So if you haven't started it yet, I think it's absolutely doable to read it in a month and then come join us. I'm looking forward to that discussion. It's an interesting book, both in how it was written and just the topics that it discusses. And if you want to join us for any of those clubs, you can absolutely join us at our Facebook group, which I have provided a link for here. So we're the Dragonfly Arts Group. We don't just do these monthly meetings. We also do tons of other things. We do live meetups. We have one coming up at the end of April that I'm looking forward to in Los Angeles. And even if you're not in the LA area, we do a lot of virtual things. And we're just a community that, by artists, for artists, and we discuss a lot of things. And we'd be happy to have you there. And if you like the kinds of things that you find there, you can always support us on Patreon. We don't have any perks at the moment, but that is something that we are working towards. So right now, you can donate as little as $2 a month to our Patreon and just support the things that we do, not just the clubs, but like I said, all of the other things, including meetups and other things that we have in the works at the moment. But I think that's my whole spiel. You'd think I'd be used to it by now. So let's talk about the Smashing Pumpkins, Adore, which was actually an album that Beckett picked.
And she showed up tonight.
Her. Yes, I remembered.
I mean, if we're going to throw her under the bus, we can also throw Miguel under the bus on that one. So.
Oh yes, definitely. You let me down, Miguel.
Yes, I let myself down.
So
I can't tell you how much I love that Fleetwood Mac album either. So I was very pissed at myself for forgetting about
that. That's okay. You're here now. Plus, you can always watch things on the replay, which I didn't talk about how there's only 4 of us on this call because that's how many people I can manage. But we do let people participate in live or on the replay by if you comment on it and we are live, we can see those comments. We can communicate with you. If you're watching it on the replay, we still get a notification, or at least we would if this was on Facebook, I don't get notifications for YouTube, but I try to check them out occasionally.
I fixed the Facebook stream. We are on Facebook.
Oh, awesome. It's still showing an error on my end, but I'm awesome.
Refresh.
I'm not going to fall for that trick. Tim. Just disappear. Yeah, if you comment on the replay, then we can still see those comments and we still want to discuss it with you. So, yeah. I have a standard set of questions that I always ask. So, have you guys heard this album before?
You mean before I knew it was in the listening club? No.
Yeah, I mean, I picked this one, so.
I realized that I had also not heard this album.
Really?
Yeah. I like the Smashing Pumpkins, but I listen to them like it's one of those things of when it comes on in the background, I definitely like know it, but I know some of like the more common like kind of like Siamese Dreams, and I know a lot of their other albums.
Yeah.
But I've never really listened to them from like start to finish.
I was a huge Pumpkins fan in high school, so I have listened to all of their albums except for any new ones since like 2000 and
yeah, they've released a lot recently. Actually, they had
Really?
like a hiatus, and then they came back, and they've been churning them out.
Yeah. Before this call, I watched a little video about them, so now I'm curious to check out their new music.
Yeah. And then my second question, did you enjoy it?
I guess I can go since so the only song of theirs that I could like pinpoint is 1979. And so I liked the album because it seemed kind of in that same vibe and less heavy, you know? And so I did like bits of the album, and I liked that it had more sort of, it's going to sound technical, like dynamic contrast. Like there's heavy stuff or heavier stuff, and there's also really light acoustic stuff. And I like that in bands. And I think that's one of the strengths of a band like Led Zeppelin, that everybody thinks of as a super, super heavy band, but they'd have all this lighter acoustic stuff on their albums that made the heavier stuff heavier and the lighter stuff, lighter. And I just like the contrast. And I've never listened to one of their albums. Like I say, I only know that song 1979. So I don't know if this album seems to hold together really cohesively. I don't know how that compares and contrasts to other Smashing Pumpkins albums before this, but it was a consistent sound without being super like, oh my God, another song like this, without being monotonous.
Yeah. How about you, Tim? Did you like it?
I like it so far. I'm still kind of exploring it. Outside of Pearl Jam, the music of the 90s pretty much passed me by, mostly because it was very angsty, and I was not very angsty at the time. I was doing very well, and I couldn't find a way into a lot of this music. Yeah, Pearl Jam played such hard rock that it was easy for me to jump in there. But the rest of the bands that I heard just didn't really grab me. But this one, I found it was different than what I expected. And like Miguel, I found it very interesting because of the contrast between the tunes. Yeah, and we can go. It was definitely not. I did not expect the level of songwriting craft that I hear in this album. I was expecting, and I wasn't. And the production is very impressive. But on both topics we can discuss as we go further in. But yeah, so I'll actually go back. I wanted to see if I could have time to listen to some of their other albums. What's the big one? Melancholy. What was that
Yeah,
one?
Melancholy and the
Infinite
Infinite
Sadness.
Sadness.
That was right before this one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to try to get to that one, and I only had time to listen to this album twice, so so that wasn't in the cards. But I do want to go back and look at their other stuff, and because my understanding is this is a bit different from the stuff they had done previously. Is that true?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I'm going to spend some more time with it.
Yeah, I for one love this album. It was a hyperfixation for me in the early 2000s, and like, yeah, I really really love every piece of it.
It
But
feels
like I
to
said,
me-
I was a huge fan of theirs already. So
You're right. Yeah. It feels to me like an album you have to listen to in a specific headspace almost.
well, I think it's funny that Tim mentions like 90s bands being like angsty around this time, and that was describes me to a T. So like this album, My Chemical Romance, like just all that music of that time along that vein, I was very much a part of.
See, I just spent most of the time waiting for the next Guns N' Roses album, so that was me.
This is not my favorite Smashing Pumpkins album. I do like the stuff that they did before this, and I do have a respect for Adore, just like knowing the background on it and everything that went into it. But I've had a very busy couple of weeks, and so I've come home like kind of exhausted but a little bit wired, and this was not the vibe I needed, and that probably like it does. It was a realization while I was listening to it of I did not come into this in the right mood, and it's making me like weird and conflicted.
It's very atmospheric in that way, isn't it? It's got this certain vibe to it that I find that I really have to be in the mood to get anything out of it at all.
If it was like I feel like this would be a good album to listen to in like fall or winter. Almost like it has like a very like it's not it's not an album to listen to when you're coming off of a lot of energy.
Yeah, it's very angsty and like grungy. So most of it anyway. There are some songs that are a little bit lighter, but I mean, one of my favorite songs of all time is Ava Adore. I just can't get enough of that bass line. So
That's a dark tune.
yeah. Have you met me?
Yeah, but I agree. It is a definite vibe album, and I think, if you're going back to listen to it and you've heard it before, you would like sort of be like, am I going to be able to deal with this vibe? Right.
Oh, it's all just pleasure, nostalgia center of my brain every time I listen to it. So I'm always in the mood.
There you go.
I mean, and I think it's supposed to have that vibe because, like, reading up on the background of it, all the songs on this were written by Billy Corgan, and he was going through a rough time, and the band was also going through a rough time. It's why it sounds so different from their earlier albums. Is before it was like he was still doing all the songwriting, but like I think the arrangement was done as part of a band, but the band was like having a lot of transitional things. I think it's interesting that like their bass player's not credited is uncredited on the album because she was on her way out. Like
I know she left the group not that she was around for the next album though, but I think she was having some issues with Billy and eventually decided to leave.
Yeah, and there's a
And they
different
had
drummer.
fired the drummer right before this, right?
Yeah. So it's got a different vibe because it's pretty much an entirely different band, and so it's now just highlighted around his songwriting.
Well, did more people contribute to the songwriting before this? I always thought it was him being the only songwriter.
No, I think it was just him being the songwriter, but I get the impression that it was like he was writing the song, but like I said, the arrangement of it was kind of a group effort. So everybody was putting in like their own pieces to his pot kind of thing.
Yeah, I know the
And you said
guitarist contributed a lot to the earlier songs. What was his name?
James Aha, is that how you pronounce
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was
it?
I
Is he
was
in this album?
yeah, he is.
Yeah, he's still in the band.
Okay.
I was surprised at how much electronic music was in this. That was something that I didn't know they did. Did they ever do that kind of thing before this album?
No.
Well, doesn't 1979 have a little bit of that in there?
I think they had dabbled in it before. I mean, you think of songs like Bullet with Butterfly Wings and things like that. It's a lot of hard rock, but I think there was a little bit, not nearly as much as in this album, though.
I'm probably wrong about this, but I thought that it was guitar pedals. So it was less synths on earlier albums. And also actually when they toured this album, they did the same thing. There was a lot less synth in it and a lot more going back to like guitar distortion.
It has a very, the songs that do that have a very industrial feel, almost like what's his face from Nine Inch Nails came by and
There was one song in particular that I don't remember what it is now, but there was one in particular where I was like, is this a Nine Inch Nails song? What is this coming from? But
So
Nine Inch Nails is also all distorted guitars, so that makes sense.
Another band that I love from that time.
So who's considered the main producer? Is it Billy? Is it Brad Wood at the bottom? I don't know if there's any more people listed on Wiki, but who's considered to be the producer for this? Oh my God, Flood is on there.
You know what they listed at the start usually? Producer, Billy Corgan, Flood, and Brad Wood.
I'm not familiar with Brad Wood. Flood did a lot of U2, well, still works with U2, but he did a lot of I think he joined them on Achtung Baby. So that's when they were trying to get really electronic, German crowd music kind of stuff. So does anybody know anything about Brad Wood? I mean, did he work with Nine Inch Nails? Because that was my first question was like, did he share producers with Nine Inch Nails?
No, he is most well known for working with Liz Phair and Placebo.
Oh yeah, he did Exile in Guyville. That's right.
Yeah.
Did he really? Awesome.
That's right. Now I remember.
always forget that this album does not include Stand Inside Your Love. That one was on Machino, which is the next album. And I always forget that because the cover art misleads me because that music video is very much that vibe.
Oh, you mean the cover art?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
There's also a problem that I have with Smashing Pumpkins albums of they have a lot of compilation albums. So which is part of the reason why I don't think I've ever listened to any of their albums from start to finish unless it was like for a different reason. Like this discussion, or for a while I was listening to an album like every day and one would come up on the rotation there. But yeah, there's so many compilations of like their songs that there are just so many things that I've missed.
I think I only am very familiar with the studio albums. Like I've never even heard Once in a While. Like, yeah, I don't know a lot of their like extra.
I do think it's really funny that the Japanese edition moved 17 to track 17, and it feels like that's where it always should have been.
What caught me, I was listening in today and the amount of material here. I mean, this back in the day, this would have been a double album.
Yeah.
73 minutes long.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a double album. Was Melancholy a double album? Did they do two in a row? I thought Melancholy was a double album.
I also thought Melancholy was a double album.
That one definitely had 2 discs in the CD set because I had it.
Yeah. Oh, but did this one fit on one CD?
At that time, yeah, when it was released.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so Melancholy and the
A lot of
Infinite
music.
Sadness has a length of 2 hours.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
That's a triple L. That's a triple LP back in the day.
Aren't you
Yeah.
glad I didn't pick that one?
So when I was going through this, there is a deluxe edition of Adore that is 6 hours, 30 minutes long. And I was just like,
No, I'm good. I'm good.
That's a little excessive.
Wow.
I mean, talk about angst. I would probably slit my wrists.
I think the band, if they listened to that, would slit their wrist. Jeepers. That's for a very specific demographic.
yeah.
So I have
and
a
part of me
question. Oh, sorry.
No,
Go for
you
it.
can.
I
ask
was
away.
wondering if anyone watched any of the music videos.
No, I didn't have time this month.
I kind of sort of did.
Kind
Meaning that I was listening to it on YouTube and the mix had where there was videos, the video would come up, but I was listening, not watching, and so I would miss it. There was the one where he looked like a vampire and shaved his head. Is this the first album he shaved his head?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the previous music videos from Melancholy and 1979, he had hair. So
Yeah.
I'm so
but
used
yeah,
without hair that it didn't even occur to me that he ever had hair.
yeah. Well, it started thinning, so shaved it.
There we go.
But yeah, I was a little
Not
obsessed
really.
with them. I was a little obsessed with them back in the day. So I've seen a lot of the music videos, and Ava Adore is like, as far as music videos go, it's one of my favorites of all time. I mean, not just the song, but the video as well. Like it was very revolutionary in its day, and I actually, because back then you didn't have YouTube, so I had to watch everything on like DVDs, and so I had the DVD of like the videos and the commentary that went with them. So I learned a lot. But the original idea behind that video was that it was supposed to be all one shot, and they built this massive set with different like set tableaus in it with like hundreds of actors for each one. And
big production.
Yeah, it was. If you haven't seen it, you should go watch it. It's a very fascinating video. I think it does actually end up having like 1 or 2 cuts in the final release, but the idea is that there are no cuts. It's one long shot.
Yeah. One of my favorite bands, Crowded House, was preceded by a band called Split Enz. They were both from New Zealand, the same people in the band. And they had one of my favorite songs is A Message for My Girl. And it's like that, but it's very low budget. It's just the singer and the band. And he's kind of walking
This
in a loop.
one is very, very high production quality. So,
Wow. Did you see them on this tour?
no, I've never seen them live.
Oh, okay.
I was too young. Yeah.
I was wondering, like, this stuff, when you have an album like this, that it, is from what I'm getting is kind of different from your previous stuff, that it's an interesting thing to how you integrate these things. And some people just lean into it, and the first 45 minutes is the new album, and you're just going to have to sit through it, right? I think you two did that on Octoon Baby. And so I would just be really interested to see like how they handle that and like how they do it now. Do they do these songs the way they are on the album if it makes it into a set list these days? And if so, are they kind of in their original form or are they just vastly rearranged?
Yeah, ask me in September. I'll be able to tell you. They're on tour with Green Day this year, and I'm going to go see them in September.
Oh, where are they playing?
They're playing all over the place, but I'm going to Seattle.
Oh, you're going to Seattle?
Yeah.
Where are you going to go see them in Seattle?
At the T-Mobile Stadium.
Was that where the Seahawks play?
I guess.
Well, it's a stadium. I don't think Seattle has more than one stadium, so I think so.
I think it's T-Mobile.
No, you might be right, but they those things change their names, every few years. And
yeah, no, I know. It's the large sports arena there. I don't know.
Yeah, it's probably.
But they're also playing here in like Inglewood at I don't remember what the place is called now because it's gone through something
What was
different.
the Forum?
The big
The Forum,
stadium.
yeah, it was the Forum. Now it's something else. But But yeah, they're playing there. But I don't like going there. I've been there once, and it's a mess. So
Plus, it's a reason to go to Seattle. So
yeah, and my brother's there.
will.
So
You
we've
will
been
have
talking
to
about
get
going
back
to
to
see
us.
Green Day together forever. So we're actually going to go do it. And they just so happen to be playing with Smashing Pumpkins.
There you go.
You'll
Who's headlining?
Green Day.
Hmm.
You'll have to like put in the comments afterwards. Let us know. I did actually read a little bit about that because this is so different, and I think I did mention it before, but they actually played it very differently live, and this album wasn't a hit at like when it was released. It was met like a lot of the things that were released initially as singles quickly left the radio. And a part of the reason why they think that happened was because they did go on tour to promote this album, but they played it like their old style.
Hmm.
Because how do you add in like all of these synths and all these things where it's them layering like up in the studio, where it's essentially all just Billy Corgan doing pretty much everything with just other people assisting,
Mm.
and all of a sudden having to do it with a band. So it was a lot more rock when they were touring it.
Ah,
And
okay, that
That would
makes
have a
sense.
very different sound.
yeah,
That
and
would be very different
this
and very interesting to listen to.
this album starts with a ballad, which is bonkers to me.
Yeah.
Like it
You know,
opens with a song that sounds literally like no other thing, and I'm pretty sure has a banjo on it. Like
yeah. You know,
It's my
somebody
favorite song on the album.
to
it's a
Sheila,
yeah, it's a great
Yeah.
song.
great song. But it is a weird start to an album. You know, and what's interesting about that is like how bands handle that. And so, you know, U2 handles that by like they play along to a lot of tracks, right? And there's only the four guys in the band, and there's a lot of loops and tracks. And then what Radiohead does, and this is, I'm assuming they still do it, is if there's a loop, they are creating it live on stage. They're not doing tracks that are pre-recorded, right? So yes, they have loops, but everybody's like on their laptops, you know, doing it in the moment.
Yeah.
And it may or may not sound like the album, but that's what it's going to be tonight, you know? And I
That's
really,
how Imogen Heap does it too. Her live
Yeah.
music sounds very different.
And Disclosure,
is
which
she
I
the
always think is
one
very
girl
interesting.
band act?
The one that we listened to
A
Yes.
couple months back.
a while back,
Yeah.
like last year.
Yeah. And I see her as a link between that Radiohead approach and the people that do loops like on their own. Like they're not quite as, ooh, I want to say they're not quite as creative as what Imogen Heap was doing, but they sort of like, you know, they build the song up on guitar and then they make a drum sound on the guitar and then they like, you know, get all these things going on a looper, you know? But she's like very creative with it in a way that these other bands just look like I can't afford a band and I'm going to do as much as I can with me, you know. The Super Deluxe edition comes in color.
Well, it's super deluxe.
There you go. We can afford more than, you know, sepia tones. This is awesome.
Didn't you say, Miguel, that you had something to say about the
Well, I just wanted to know if the individual, the actress or the model
Mhm.
is very distinctive, and I wonder if she was somebody associated with the band, or it just sounds like there's got to be a story to that person. That's just like, you know, I don't know. I could be wrong.
A lot of models for album covers are just hired. They're like,
Oh no, I understand, but this one kind of looks. It gives off a vibe that they're not just the hired help, but I could be wrong.
I don't know.
They're a model. It was shot by what is I just had her name and I forgot it. She's a Ukrainian photographer.
Awesome.
Who was connected to the band for there it is. Yelena
Yemchuk.
Yes. Yelena Yemchuk. And she did a lot of their album work. She worked
did.
with the Smashing Pumpkins for a very long time.
Cool. It's very striking. Yeah, I'm thinking about my record store days, like a whole end cap full of that album would be kind of creepy.
Yeah, it's very visually distinct.
Yeah. But I think the original, I'm not sure about the super deluxe version, but I think it really matches the vibe of the album.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know what you're getting. And the album art matches that, which is cool.
It is like a fascinating image of, especially like you look at the super deluxe edition, you're like, yes, this makes sense. But the initial album cover is a little bit more confusing.
Mm.
And it's really weird to me to see both of them side by side of like what the image is in the wide shot and what the actual like context is of, yeah, this is a flower. And then you look at
Yeah.
the up close and it kind of just like, partially because of the overlay, but just like it's not a flower anymore.
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't care for the newer image. I prefer the black and white image. I can't connect that image on the right to the music that I heard on the album. I can connect the image on the left to the music that I heard.
yeah.
She
And
also
the other thing-
blends. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like in the original album artwork, she blends in with the background so well. It's like you don't really know where she begins and where the background begins. And I honestly had never seen the super deluxe version, and I didn't know it was a flower. I thought it was just like more of her dress or texture or something. I don't know.
The thing I like about the original is that it sets up the vibe not only in the image, but in the way the image is not aligned with the word adore, right? Like everything to me, the original album, like everything on that album, it would, that doesn't, I wouldn't, think in 100 years it was going to be called adore if that thing wasn't there, if that word wasn't there, And so that, this sort of like adoration, but like greatly juxtaposed with a really dark image is like a great lead into what the vibe of the album is.
You know, and what's interesting about the title of the album, Adore, is that there's no track on the album called Adore, which means that it is more the bow on top of the album.
Mm.
So, but it is an interesting thing of, well, now we have to talk about what does it mean?
Well, there is a song track on the album with Adore in the title.
That's true.
Beckett's favorite.
So one of the things that I found interesting, and I did a double take when I heard it, because we listened to Fleetwood Mac for last month, and I was listening to the album, and the track "Once Upon a Time" came on, and I'll be damned, I was thinking, this sounds like something Lindsey Buckingham might have written musically around the time of Tusk, and I was like, there was a song from there, and I was like, what song is this? And there's a song on Tusk called "That's All for Everyone." And I swear to God, they don't sound exactly alike, but they sound so similar.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yes, I agree. And I remember that fleeting vibe of like, reminds me of something. I can't think of it. Right. But that's awesome.
And then there was another song called "The Tale of Dusty and Pistol Pete." And I was like, this totally sounds like something Lindsey Buckingham would have written. So I went and looked at Billy Corgan's bio on Wikipedia, and Lindsey Buckingham's name never comes up. Fleetwood Mac never comes up. The other thing that I heard, more production, but also some songwriting, is I heard a lot of Beatles sounding production here. And then there's Tear or Tear. Is it Tear or Tear?
Tear.
Okay, Tear. There are parts of that. It's like the first half of that song reminds me of something that George Harrison might have written. And the second half of that song sounds like something that John Lennon might have written. It was just, and I just kept hearing these, and, looking at Corgan's bio, no mention of the Beatles at all. So, I found it very interesting that those things jumped out at me. And maybe it might just be because I'm so fucking old and there's nothing new under the sun.
No, it's interesting that you bring that up, because I actually, before we jumped on this call, I had happened upon, because I also listened to the album on YouTube, and I happened upon a video about Billy Corgan and some of his high profile celebrity beefs. He's notorious for that. And one of them, ironically, is that he accused this other like kind of one-hit wonder 90s band of not that they're a one-hit wonder, but I had never heard of this other band, but like of plagiarizing off of him. And the song that he accused them of doing that was like, it was released well before Smashing Pumpkins was even a band. So it's like, maybe there's some subconscious like projection there on his part, because I know he likes to fancy himself like the greatest musician of all time and completely all original in everything that he does.
I could absolutely see it being him taking influence from it, but it not being cool if he takes influence from it, so we don't talk about it. That's kind of
no. He just came up with it all on his own because he's a genius.
Yeah.
He's been doing interviews recently over the past year where, I was like, okay, I didn't really know much about him, but I don't like him very much because he seems to think very highly of himself.
That's what I'm trying to get at. Yes, he does. And a lot of people feel that way about him for that reason. A lot of people don't like him.
And that's not to take away, because the songwriting craft that I heard on this album was very impressive. I just, listened to Ave Adore. No, actually it was when I was listening to Sheila. I'm like, I'm not sure exactly what these lyrics mean, but they're really good. They just, and then I pulled up the lyrics and I looked at them and I was like, okay, now I'm starting to get a sense of what this song is about, but he never points directly at what he's trying to say. He's seems almost poetic in that fashion, in that he poses stuff that seems distant from where he's trying to go. But if you put all of the lyrics of a song together, there is a coherent idea there. It's just you have to really be working at it to find what it is that he's trying to say. And that's one of the things that impressed me about To Sheila. I think it's a great, and a lot of the songwriting is like that, where the next tune is Ave Adore, isn't it? That one caught my ear the minute I heard the word whore, and I'm like, oh, where are we going here? But the lyric redeems itself, I think.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
When you say that, Tim, I want to go back and listen again because I missed that.
Obviously, I don't mind crass language like that in my music. And I think there is an alternate meaning to the use of that word outside of the fact that it just rhymes with the following yeah. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, if you listen to the lyrics of that song, it's a lot of him stroking his own ego. I mean, there's a lyric that goes, "If I pull your crooked teeth, you'll be perfect just like me."
Yeah. There's a lot of...
And Billy Corgan is notorious for having bad teeth. He has never fixed them in all these years.
It felt narcissistic, misogynist. There was... but it didn't feel like it was doing that uncritically. I think it felt like he was very aware of what that sounded, and that was to present this character, be it him or whoever that character is, to present who this character in this lyric is. And I think he does it very effectively.
Yeah, no, I don't think that it's malicious in nature. Like,
No.
I mean, this is my favorite song on the album. It's one of my favorite songs of all time. So, like, I don't think that it's, it's trying to kind of, in a tongue-in-cheek way, put a mirror up to himself stroking his own ego. I think.
Yes, I mean, it feels so. If you're the person writing that, and it feels like it's about you, it feels like it's a very self-critical song. Like he understands that this character is, the things that he's saying are not. I don't want to say not appropriate, but they're those ideas are kind of mean, and it's not the kind of things that a normal person would say about the person that they love. So I think he's showing what this horrible thing is. I don't think it's an uncritical song at all. I think he's taking a very, if he's looking at himself, he's taking a very uncritical look at the negative qualities that he has.
Yeah. Well, and it's very on the nose that you say that, because he wrote that song about breaking up with Courtney Love.
Mm,
And they had a really ugly breakup.
interesting.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, and he was very infatuated with her, even after everything. Like he never really got over her. So
Well, who would? It's Courtney.
I've spent a while like going like back and forth, like trying to corroborate like information on this. Of he was going through a divorce while he wrote this, so I'm not sure if it's about Courtney Love or his
X.
or his future ex, I guess.
Soon to be X. His D fiance.
yeah, I guess it could be either. I just assumed it was her because I know they had a very volatile relationship.
It could just be about everybody all at once as
Mhm.
well, of just like the feelings you get after a breakup, after a very significant, where there's still like a part of you, but just said in a very crass way. And that's kind of was my interpretation of it, because I did know going into listening to it that he was like going through a lot of personal things, including that, and then like the song To Martha, which is exactly like just about his mom.
Yeah, because she died just before this, right?
Yes. So
Well,
Yeah,
that flatline conversation.
a lot of emotion in this album.
Yeah, you can hear it. You can hear it, and I think that's interesting, and it's really interesting to compare it to the Fleetwood Mac album, because there was so much going on volatile relationship wise there, and yet it's not a dark album in the way that this is. And maybe that could be because there's, 3 primary songwriters in that band, so you're getting all the different facets of the relationship this one person has, or the relationship all those people had, and whereas this, we're seeing one person's darkness.
it's also just like very, very different like vibes as bands, because even though this is very different from like things Smashing Pumpkins, they've always been dark.
Yeah,
And I view like the Smashing Pumpkins are a huge part of like the grunge movement, and like a lot of things during this time were like very, very dark, and like it was all about that kind of expression of like that sort of inside feeling. And I think that when Fleetwood Mac came out, there was a very different vibe about how you present your
it's the
issues. And so
70s.
it's almost a societal difference between like the two eras.
Yeah,
It's interesting because I didn't want. I'm hesitant to refer to them as grunge, but then again, this album is different from the other albums, because this sounds very different from what I would call grunge. This is not Soundgarden. This is not Pearl Jam. And for instance, I mentioned how Pearl Jam was the only grunge 90s art band that I really got into. Those are all characters that Eddie Vedder is talking about. He's talking about characters within society, whereas this album is all, again, going back, this is all about this one guy. It clearly comes through. So there's almost a focus in this album in very one dark place that's not apparent on Soundgarden albums or Pearl Jam albums, and maybe not on previous Smashing Pumpkin albums.
Yeah, I would consider this album probably
a Billy Corgan solo
kind of
album.
like, what?
A Billy Corgan solo album, maybe.
No, I was gonna say like an early proto emo.
Yeah, what's the genre? What's the genre for Nine Inch Nails? I don't honestly. I mean, it's kind of industrial, and they're kind of their own genre.
Yeah,
What's that?
industrial. Industrial is the name that I use. I was.
Yeah.
It was interesting that you said emo because I was like thinking. I was thinking goth a lot of the time when I was listening to this
Yeah,
album.
certainly the album cover is goth.
I think they're described mostly as like gothic rock.
Yeah, this photograph is very goth.
Yeah,
So is the album cover, at least the black and white one.
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. You know, the other contrast with the Fleetwood Mac turmoil in Rumors is that those people were all in a band together. So, you know, if Billy was in a band with his soon-to-be ex-wife and Courtney Love, the vibe would be different because he's also competing with other songwriters who are trying to get their say in, you know?
Yeah.
So there's also that difference of the person that you're sticking the knife into is 10 feet away from you on stage. Right. And you know they're going to be 10 feet away from your stage because you're not going to break up and you're going to tour the album. So
I don't know.
mind your manners.
I think Don Felder and Glenn Fry might have a different opinion on that.
Oh, you mean in terms of people not liking each other in the same band? You mean?
On the same stage at the same time and wanting to kill each other right there in the moment.
Oh boy. Well, anyway.
Yeah, well, I know that Darcy was on her way out for a long time, but she stuck it out. So even though it was not a good relationship, not that they were romantic or anything, but like they butted heads.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
as we're
well, I
discussing,
can. That is one thing about one of my impressions of Smashing Pumpkins is it was the Billy Corgan show, and number two, I don't think I could ever be in a band with the Billy Corgan show. That would be really difficult. Now, I understood that he had a really good relationship, or a really strong bond with the drummer that got kicked out before this band, but that was because of a drug overdose. And it seems almost like the way I've read about it, it's kind of like a therapeutic kicking you out of the band. We're kicking you out of the band so that you cannot die, as opposed to you're out of the band because you're a druggie. But didn't the bass player have similar problems? Didn't she also have a drug problem, heroin and stuff like that? Or am I thinking of somebody else?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I
don't know. I mean, it's not uncommon for musicians. So
No, absolutely not. And yeah. And
Hush your mouth.
I'm sorry?
I said, hush your mouth.
But anyway, I just got the sense
I mean, musicians in high-profile rock bands specifically.
Yeah, that is a tough lifestyle. Having that much free time on tour is enough to kill anybody.
So ultimately, Darcy Retzky decided to leave the band with intentions of pursuing an acting career. However, it seems like most of the people did leave the band because Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness was so popular that it suddenly, like, they all descended into insanity and or drugs, is what she said. So there was definitely a lot of that, but she states that her reason for leaving the band was that she wanted to pursue a different career course in acting.
Huh. There you go.
But it does feel like it was because things got a little bit too.
Yeah, well, I mean, they were like launched into the stratosphere practically overnight, so that does a number on anyone.
And that was with Melancholy, right? Like they got huge with that album.
Yeah.
And this is the album after that album. So it'd be interesting to contrast. Like, I'm assuming this photo that we're looking at is like, part of the press kit for this album. It would be interesting to contrast that with the albums before they were huge, because this, like, you could also look at this as the, what do you call it? The morning after the hangover, after the big, huge success.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It feels like a picture where they still know what they have a vibe that they're aiming for, and they finally got like the money to realize the look they're going for, and then I think they had to settle into something.
It kind of looks like the dark side of Joshua Tree.
Oh yeah, with the tree.
I mean, they definitely don't look happy.
Yeah, it's not a happy looking bunch of individuals.
And even in some ways, Jimmy Ehart reminds me of the cover of the first Black Sabbath album.
Oh yeah, huh? He's got the same haircut. I did see some live footage on YouTube, and there was nobody original in the band, but it was from 10 or 12 years ago. Didn't the drummer rejoin the band, the original drummer, Jimmy Chamberlain?
I know that when they do live shows, because they disbanded and then got back together again, and even when they got back together again, they constantly have people just rotating through. So they might do a tour, and like one of the past members will join in for a second. So that's entirely possible. But like
Becca,
it's more of a rotating.
really? Becca, do you know who's going to be in the band when you see him?
Billy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I on their profile picture on YouTube, James is there. So I assume he's a regular appearance in the group.
Yeah,
And
I
the
mean,
drummers-
I looked at their Wikipedia page, and it seems that Billy and James are in the band, and then whoever is their present either bass player or drummer. But the band itself is just a trio at the moment, and I guess they hire whatever other players they need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always been more of a trio.
Chamberlain has been considered a current member of the band again since 2015. So
Yeah,
he's
and
been
I
touring with
thought,
them
yeah,
since
that's what I thought.
2015. Yeah. And then they have live members, which are the people who kind of switch.
Yeah, Chamberlain is the other one that's mentioned on the Wikipedia page as the full-time member of the band, aside from Morgan and Iha.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. That's kind of what I felt was going on. I know more about him than I know about the band.
This was
Yeah.
a very interesting listen. I'm glad you picked it, Beckett, because I never would have listened to Smashing Pumpkins otherwise. If not, I probably would have gotten them eventually. But I'm just getting around to STP right now, so
Eh.
who the fuck knows?
I am a huge aficionado of 90s music if you ever need recommendations.
All right.
All right, so we are coming up on an hour. Does anybody have anything else that they'd like to bring up regarding this album?
Just that I'm curious now, and I'm going to go look into what happened to Darcy. What happened to her? Like, what's she up to now? I don't know.
I don't know. She still has a Wikipedia page all on her own, so there's a lot of stuff on there that I'm sure you can find, but I didn't read through it.
Huh.
Just curious.
I do think artistically, we've been talking a lot about personal dynamics and stuff that don't have to do with the artistry that went into the album. I think artistically, the album really holds up. This album is how old? Is it 20 years?
It came out in 1998.
1998.
So
Okay, so it's 25 years, right? Plus. So that's like, it works artistically. And so that's a credit to them. And it might only be a credit to Billy, but it is a credit to somebody. And it's good work.
Mm-hmm.
well, and it took their skill as well as musicians to perform on the album too. He may have written it, but they also contributed.
Yeah. But it's like it's a solid piece of art, solid piece of work.
I was reading, and what I've heard. I mean, I haven't actually listened to enough, and I haven't heard him play a solo. But I understand Billy Corgan is apparently a pretty good guitar player.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Yeah, he just kind of in their later stuff leaned more into the frontman / singer songwriter thing.
Yeah. And he also does some production because I know Kenny Aronoff played on the Tony Iommi solo album, and Billy was the producer. Speaking of the Black Sabbath,
Interesting.
Oh,
Lane.
Kenny Aronoff. I met him
You met Kenny. Where'd you meet Kenny?
at a business conference. He's a very funny guy. Very.
Oh, was he speaking? He does a lot of public speaking. Was he speaking at the conference?
Yeah.
Kenny was very kind to me when I spoke to him and tried to set up time with him for the book, and he is just complete friggin' force of nature.
He is, and he's also kind of a whirlwind. He's hard to pin down. Because I also tried to get him for like as a guest speaker on Dragonfly Q&A, and it never worked out because you can't hold down a tornado.
Yeah, he's a busy dude, and he does a fair amount of public speaking. And I know he's, because I follow him on Instagram, like he's like in the Middle East and places like
Mhm.
that, doing these public speaking gigs, which is like, wow, cool. Not bad for a drummer.
Hmm.
Yeah, he is a character.
I think that's so neat that you met him, Beckett.
I didn't know who he was. So yeah, he came over and started talking to a group that I was hanging out with, and I was just like, "Who's this weird guy?" So
He's a really great drummer. And one of the greatest things I learned from him is he talked about getting fired from the first John Cougar Mellencamp album he was recording, right? And it's just this amazing story about not allowing himself to be fired. I mean, he was fired and somebody replaced him on the album, right? But he talks about this in his clinics that he does. It's just really, really cool stuff. A lot of people wouldn't talk about one of their first and biggest failures so openly.
Oh, I have a fun fact about Smashing Pumpkins.
Oh, there you go. Let's hear it.
Tangentially, my first car was named after Billy.
Wait, the car was named Billy, or was the Billy Corrigan?
No, my first car was named Corgan after Billy Corgan.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
My daughter names her cars, but
were
they're
deep
very
into that.
non-literal.
What was that, Tim?
You were deep.
I told you I was a huge fan. But yeah, I used to name my cars after male musicians that I liked.
Oh.
Now I name them after video game and anime characters.
Woo. What's the name of your current car, Beckett?
My
Progress.
current car is Sebastian.
Oh.
If you know, you know.
I don't
My-
know.
I wouldn't expect you to.
Isn't that a
I was
character?
going
in
to say
Beauty
you're a
and
big fan of the Little Mermaid, and then was that Crab, right? Yeah.
Oh, well, I was thinking Disney. I thought it was Beauty and the Beast, but okay, Little Mermaid.
No, it's not that.
Little crabby.
Anyways, before we get too off topic,
We are
Before?
too late. No, that was a Billy Corrigan thing. That was on topic. You hush.
I am going to
Sebastian.
end the call for tonight
Okay.
because my rabbit's name is also Sebastian, but for different reasons, and he needs to eat some food. So
Well, he is black and white, just like my Sebastian.
You're
There you
Sebastian.
Is he named after the crab in Little Mermaid?
no, but my last
Oh.
name is Crab, and so that caused a lot of confusion when the first person told me that I was very clever for coming up with Sebastian Crab, and I was like, "Yep."
You both have very cute Sebastians.
Anyways,
That
I'm gonna
sounded
end this
dirty.
stream.
I didn't mean that to sound dirty.
No.
Anyways, good night, everyone.
For joining us.
You guys.
See you on the next one.